If the New Orleans Saints can get breakout seasons from Chase Young and Kendre Miller, it could mean big things for their rebuild. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at two players that if the Saints can see breakout seasons from in 2025, it could help them out massively for 2026 and beyond, and even, of course, in 2025 as well. Kendre Miller, if he could be second in rushing yards, it could have a big impact on the New Orleans Saints. And Chase Young, if he leads the team in sacks, it makes a big-time investment worth every single penny for New Orleans. We got that and a little bit more coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. New Orleans Saints defensive end Chase Young could be the most important player on defense for the New Orleans Saints. Yeah, I think Alontae Taylor can be the defensive MVP, but I do think that one of the most important players coming from one of the most important positions in football on that defensive side of the ball for Brandon Staley and the New Orleans Saints all comes down to edge rusher Chase Young. The New Orleans Saints have not had a double-digit sack leader in some time. We've seen now over the course of the past few years, 8.5, 7.5, those sack totals leading the way for this team. Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson last year, defensive tackle Brian Brzee with 7.5 sacks led the team. Those aren't necessarily bad things, but you'd like to see those numbers tick up, right? As we've talked about quite a bit here on the show, the Saints have not reached 40 sacks in either of the last couple of seasons, despite the fact that they've had 17 games to play. They were eclipsing that 40 sack kind of space over the course of the past few years, starting from 2017, going all the way back. You look at Brandon Staley's defenses in each of the last, since 2020 through 2023, he and his defenses have eclipsed 40 sacks every season but one. So good news for the New Orleans Saints in that case. And look, you've seen good production from edge rushers in particular in Brandon Staley's system. Khalil Mack, 17.5 sacks his last season with Brandon Staley. You can go back to a Joey Bosa, 10.5 sack season, 13.5 for Aaron Donald in 2020, 10.5 for Leonard Floyd in 2020 as well. So you can see that this scheme is built to support those pass rushers. Now, I know I mentioned Aaron Donald in there as a defensive tackle and everything like that, but even in that same season, you also had a double-digit 10.5 sack edge rusher with Leonard Floyd. So you think about where it is that a guy like Chase Young could potentially have his greatest impact in 2025, and it comes from exactly that spot, being that edge rusher, that stand-up edge rusher, getting to use that speed and athleticism. If he not only leads the team in sacks, because you don't want to lead the team in sacks with 7.5 again, right? You don't want to see that be the case. And so if he leads the team in sacks with a double-digit sack performance, it makes the Saints' biggest offseason investment this past year, 3-year, $51 million extension worth up to $57 million, worth every penny. And it sets themselves up in 2026 and 2027, potentially his last 2 years in that 3-year deal, to really be able to build around him, right? Like if he ends up becoming this big fixture for the New Orleans Saints defense as an elite level production or elite production level edge rusher in Brandon Staley's system, then that means that going into next year, where you might not see Cam Jordan return, where you might not see Demario Davis return, where you might not see Tyrann Mathieu return, right? Some veterans that might be on their way out. The Saints could then build around Chase Young as their cornerstone in the way that they've tried to build around Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, and Tyrann Mathieu as their cornerstones over the course of the past few years, but you're still doing it with a guy that's not 30 years old just yet, right? And so you're building towards that future. So Chase Young's breakout potential in 2025 means more than just the impact of 2025. Would you like to see him succeed in 2025? Absolutely. Would you like to see this team succeed in 2025? Of course. But it's about also building for that future. We've discussed several times here on this show that this kind of rebuild process for Kellen Moore and the New Orleans Saints is a multi-year endeavor, right? It's incremental improvements over the course of the next few years. We don't know Kellen Moore's contract terms thus far, but I imagine that it is a long-term, waited out, be patient kind of deal with Kellen Moore, because you're going to see a roster flip next year. You're possibly going to see some coaching staff turnover next year as well, depending upon who becomes available and who ends up getting hired away and all these other things. Like, there's all those little tinkering moments that are going to happen over the course of the next few years. What the Saints have helped themselves with, and we'll dive into this tomorrow when I go into grading the New Orleans Saints offseason. We're going to do this over the course of a few episodes, but I'm going to give you some A's, B's, C's, D's, and F grades throughout the offseason. And one of my top things is the coaching staff, because the fact that the Saints don't have to deal with the rotating door of offensive coordinators at all because of a good move that they made on the coaching staff. And so building out that coaching staff has allowed them to be able to really kind of hopefully keep this thing together long enough that they can build the roster that this coaching staff is looking for. And if Chase Young proves to be a cornerstone player for that, along with guys like Alontae Taylor, Chase Young, ideally Kool-Aid McKinstry becomes a part of that conversation. Some other linebacker outside of Demario Davis maybe takes a step forward as well. If those guys can do that, then it makes it a little bit easier to keep building around those players, right? Once you have sort of those cornerstone, staples on your defense, being able to then put the pieces around them that make them better, that put them in better situations, that add to them, right? That ends up having a major impact. And so you can learn a little bit about that over the course of the 2025 season based on some of these performances. And so if Chase Young can have this breakout double-digit sack leader for the Saints season, then I think that puts New Orleans in a really, really good position to continue to put together the building blocks over on the defensive side over the course of the next couple of years, because they'll have that fixture to build around. Similarly, if the Saints can get a breakout year from Kendre Miller over on the offensive side of the football, that has a major impact for their ability to build moving forward on the offensive side as well. Let's get to that next, because I want to tell you why Kendre Miller's performance might be one of the most important to track over the course of 2025 because of what it means beyond this year. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, so whether you're enjoying baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or some high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every moment more with your favorite sports. Whether you're following all of the action, which you know you're doing anyway, so you might as well make it a little bit more thrilling while all your friends are getting some sunburn out on the beach or whatever. With FanDuel, you can get in on the game like nowhere else has to offer. I use FanDuel all the time for picking my favorite matchups, some same game parlays. I even really like the fun of kind of going into, like, maybe in a baseball game, taking watching a bet ride going into the 9th inning, maybe something with the live betting. There's a ton for you to check out over there. And hey, new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app or head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Kendre Miller's performance in 2025 might be one of the most important to watch on the offensive side of the football. Now, of course, the most important thing that you're going to be watching on the offensive side is whoever the quarterback is at any given moment throughout the 2025 season. There's no doubt about that. I'm not trying to overshadow the quarterback competition. It's the biggest thing that's happening for the New Orleans Saints. But I do think that the success of a Kendre Miller in particular as a running back behind Alvin Kamara would be massive for New Orleans. This guy was a third-round investment years ago, going into his third year. He's got a contract year on the way next year. This is a real prove-it moment for him. And if he proves that he can break out and contribute and be a solid contributor on the offensive side of the football, and even just finish second in rushing, that has a big-time ripple effect for New Orleans. Because if he stays healthy for, let's say, 15 of 17 games, or all of the 17 games, he proves that. if he can go out there and produce, which we've seen him do, talent has never been the question. It's always been health for him, unfortunately, and availability. Then I think that ends up giving you somebody that you can really build around if you're the New Orleans Saints as you move into your future. Who knows how much longer Alvin Kamara is around, or what changes the run game is going to see, or what kind of other attrition ends up impacting the position that often gets impacted by attrition, the running back spot, right? And so having a guy like Kendre Miller step up in 2025, I think has a good ripple effect for New Orleans, not just for 2025, but as we discussed with Chase Young, your kind of fixtures that you can start to build around as your young talent, your young core, if you will, going into 2026, 2027. Who are you building around? Who are you putting pieces around? All those other things. Because look, Kendre Miller could go out in 2025 and have a great second in rushing year for the team, right? Not second in rushing for the league, but second in rushing for the team behind Alvin Kamara. And then let's say that the Saints decide to go a different direction in the coming years around Alvin Kamara. It's going to happen eventually. Then the Saints can make a decision. Is Kendre Miller the guy that you go and find a complimentary piece for? Or do you go and find a new number one guy that ends up being sort of this eclectic, versatile, operates in space pass catcher type, while allowing Kendre Miller to continue to be the complementary piece along with guys like Devin Neal and whoever else you add over the course of those years? Or is it Devin Neal and Kendre Miller that end up being sort of the longtime stalwarts at that position all of a sudden? If you have one of those questions answered, which is who is one of those two backs for your future, then I think you're in a really good place if you're New Orleans. The Saints are in a really interesting position, because since the 2020 season, when Latavius Murray came in second in rushing for the New Orleans Saints behind Alvin Kamara, no running back has been number two in rushing for New Orleans. 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, all four of those seasons, Taysom Hill was a number two rusher in that offense. And we don't know when Taysom Hill is going to be ready, when he's going to be available, if he's going to be available in 2025. He had that really bad knee injury in December going up against the Los Angeles Rams. And now he's out there. I mean, we've seen him out there during mandatory minicamp. He didn't have a brace on. He wasn't using like crutches or any kind of assisted walking things or anything like that. So there is something to that, and that's a positive sign. But that doesn't mean that he's ready to take hits in the NFL. It doesn't mean that he's ready to cut and move and short area, change of direction, like handle all of those things. It doesn't mean that he's ready for that. And so if the Saints don't have Taysom Hill to begin the 2025 season, they're going to have to get that secondary rushing production from someone somewhere. The Saints added Cam Akers. They moved on from Xavier and Valladay. They have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They brought in Marcus Yarns and Devin Neal as undrafted free agents. They added Velus Jones Jr. They bring back Kendre Miller. They've got Alvin Kamara. It's a very, very busy running back room in New Orleans right now. And those guys are all going to be competing and vying for opportunities. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back as well, somebody whose dream was to play in a New Orleans Saints uniform. He got to live that dream late last season, but can he keep it going into 2025? There's a lot of opportunity for all of these guys. I would say that running back 2 position kind of wide open behind Alvin Kamara. But if it's Kendre Miller in particular, who they invested a 3rd round pick in, who they took over other running backs in this draft, who feels like he is so ready to go out there and contribute, but has dealt with so many limiting factors when it comes to his health and availability, if he all of a sudden answers all the questions and checks all the boxes, that's a major win for New Orleans. And maybe that's the impact of Ted Rath. Maybe that's the impact of, adjusted things that the Saints are doing to kind of try to keep their players healthy. You see with during OTAs and minicamps, no 11-on-11 drills, just 9-on-7 and 7-on-7. They didn't practice with helmets when they did do walkthroughs and things like that to try to deter away from physical contact. They're trying to keep their players healthy, get them in the training camp, get them into the regular season. They're doing the right things when it comes to all of that, because if the trade-off is 15 to 17 games from some of your best players, I think that's a pretty good trade-off. The question is, are you able to install? Are you able to, get the offense going? And are you able to get the defense going despite not doing those things during this early period? We don't know. We'll have to see where things go there. But if the Saints are able to get their offense going, and Kendre Miller is a big part of that, and he's contributing as the secondary rusher, and he's contributing as a pass protector, and he's contributing as a pass catcher every now and then. We've seen some great catch and run opportunities for him. over the course of his first 2 seasons when he was able to be out on the field. I think that's a major win for New Orleans, just like Chase Young on the defensive side is a major win for New Orleans. So if you can get breakout years from either one of those players, ideally both of those players, Chase Young and Kendre Miller. And look, the conversation doesn't stop there. What if you can get a breakout season from Bub Means? What if you can get a breakout season from Kool-Aid McKinstry? What if you also get a breakout season from Alontae Taylor and from Carl Granderson? Like, your defense is looking pretty good in that situation. What if you can get a breakout season from Trevor Penning on the interior? What if you can get a breakout season from one of these 2 quarterbacks? Like, there's a lot of these breakout potential players out there that all have positive ripple effects. These are 2 that I wanted to highlight today because we're looking at rushing and pass rush. And I think that if you can get good seasons, good breakout, solid, successful seasons where Chase Young leads your team in sacks and eclipses double digits, if Kendre Miller can be second on your team in rushing, at least, right? Second on your team in rushing. If he ends up becoming the number 1 rusher, then something's happened with Alvin Kamara. That would be unfortunate. So I'm going to say second in rushing. Then I think that that has positive impact too, in terms of not just 2025, but again, building beyond that. So we'll be looking at that, and we'll be looking at more of those breakout potential players. Let me know who you think are some of the most important breakout potential players as well. We'll hit them here on the show. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, I want to grade some of the New Orleans Saints offseason as we begin our series of grading out the offseason for New Orleans. I'll tell you why the coaching staff gets an A, why Chase Young's new contract gets a C, and what gets an F, which has more to do with players that the Saints couldn't retain this offseason. We'll dive into all of that in tomorrow's episode. Make sure you come through for it. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.